Hello, my name is Ava, and I'd like to tell you about an unforgettable vacation I had with my father, Thomas. I was 21, and after everything our family had been through, particularly after my mother's death, we both felt it was time to reconnect. Our relationship had changed dramatically since her death, and we were both in need of healing. It seemed like the ideal opportunity to mend our relationship, so we booked a week at a beautiful beach resort. I didn't know what to expect, but I was determined to make the best of it. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so I can continue to share fascinating true stories like this one. And don't forget to watch the entire video and like it, because this story is going to be extremely interesting. Please click the like button to show your support. When we arrived, the weather was ideal. The sun shone brightly, casting a golden glow over everything. When we got out of the car and onto the soft sand, I felt an overwhelming sense of freedom, as if the stress of life had melted away with the ocean breeze. The beach stretched out ahead of us, endless and inviting. The waves danced in the sunlight, creating a lovely shimmer on the water. I could feel the excitement rising within me, the kind of rush that comes from knowing you're in the midst of something special, something you'll never forget. I ran toward the water without thinking, my bare feet sinking into the cool sand. I felt liberated and alive, my worries washed away by the rhythm of the waves. "Small slowpoke," I exclaimed, laughing, as I dashed into the waves, the water splashing around me. My dad was right behind me, laughing and splashing water at me. I could hear the joy in his voice, and it brought back memories of when we were younger, before everything changed. In that moment, our connection felt so strong, as if we had both discovered a piece of our former selves. When I looked back at him, I couldn't help but notice how handsome he still looked. Even as he grew older, his strong build and warm smile kept him looking young. Well, my father is very attractive, I thought, shaking my head to clear my thoughts. The sun shone on his face, and the joy in his eyes made my heart race. But I quickly dismissed the thought, he was my father after all. That first night at the resort, we attended a beach bonfire organized for guests. The fire crackled and popped, scattering sparks across the night sky. We sat on the sand, surrounded by laughter and stories from fellow vacationers. Everyone seemed carefree, and I felt a sense of belonging, as if we were a part of something larger than ourselves. The night air was warm, and the salty smell of the ocean blended with the aroma of burning wood. As I sat there, I couldn't help but notice a few guys looking our way. I felt a mixture of pride and embarrassment, unsure how to respond. "Dad, don't embarrass me," I joked, nudging him. My cheeks flushed, but I felt a thrill from the attention. To my surprise, he wrapped his arm around my shoulders and pulled me closer. "I'm not trying to embarrass you, kiddo," he said, his tone warm and comforting. "Just enjoying the night with my daughter." At that point, I felt a rush of warmth between us, and it wasn't from the fire. There was something deeper, something that made my heart beat faster. Was it just the heat from the flames, or was there something else? The following day, we rented bikes and decided to ride along the beach. It was the ideal day for it. Clear skies, a gentle breeze, and the sound of waves breaking in the distance. The sun was shining, and I could feel it on my skin as we pedaled side by side. I enjoyed being outside with my father because it made me feel connected to him in a way that was difficult to describe. As we cycled, I felt the wind blow through my hair, but I also noticed his gaze on me. Every time I looked back at him, his gaze lingered just a little too long. At first, I thought it was just normal fatherly attention, but as the minutes passed, I began to wonder if he was feeling anything more than fatherly love. My thoughts raced, and I tried to concentrate on the ride, but something about his stare made me uneasy. Was I imagining things, or was there an unspoken conflict between us? I took a minor spill off my bike just as I was attempting to shake the thought away. It wasn't a bad fall, just a minor stumble, but it took me by surprise. I laughed it off, brushing the sand from my hands. But when I looked up, I noticed my father rushing toward me. His face was full of concern, and I could see it in his eyes. "Are you all right?" he inquired, his voice filled with genuine concern. He helped me up, his hands steady but gentle, and when our gazes met, I felt a strange jolt of electricity pass through me. It was just a fall, I reminded myself. However, the connection between us felt more intense. It takes longer than expected. What was going on? I thought, trying to dismiss the feelings I couldn't articulate. That night, as we were settling into our cabin, a sudden storm hit. The wind howled outside, and the rain fell in sheets. We were safe inside, wrapped in towels, and the cabin's warmth contrasted with the stormy weather outside. We laughed while sipping hot cocoa, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at ease. There was something reassuring about being there with him, a quiet moment of safety and connection. But as we sat there, I couldn't shake the sense that something had changed between us. As I smiled at him, a thought occurred. Why do I feel this way about my father? Is it simply because we spend so much time together? It made no sense, but I couldn't ignore it. The following morning, the sky was clear again, and the storm had passed. We decided to walk along the beach. The sand was soft beneath our feet, the sound of the waves crashing was relaxing, and the call of the seagulls overhead added to the tranquil atmosphere. "Can I tell you something, Dad?" I inquired, feeling nervous but determined to express how I felt. "It feels like we're closer than ever. You're more than just my father, you're my best friend." His expression softened, and I could see the warmth in his eyes. "I feel the same way, Ava," he said. But his voice was so intense that my heart skipped a beat. His words seemed to have a deeper meaning. Later in the day, we decided to visit some local shops. As we walked through the colorful market, I noticed the vibrant displays of handmade jewelry and trinkets. I saw a beautiful seashell necklace and rushed to try it on. "Dad, what do you think?" I asked, turning to face him in the mirror. When I turned back to face him, I noticed him staring at me. His expression was a mix of admiration and something else I couldn't identify. It was a look that made my heart race but also confused me. My cheeks flushed, and I quickly turned away, feeling a strange combination of excitement and confusion. What was happening between us? Was I reading too much into things? As the week progressed, the unspoken tension between us seemed to grow. One evening, we chose to watch the sunset from our balcony. The sky was painted pink, purple, and orange, and it was absolutely stunning. "This is stunning, isn't it?" I said, turning to face him. But he wasn't simply admiring the view. Instead, he was staring deep into my eyes, as if looking for something. "It really is, Ava," he said, his voice soft and almost silent. "Dad, I started, but I hesitated. Was I ready to express what I was feeling? Was it just the beauty of the moment, or was there something else? Before I could say anything more, he interrupted me. "You know I love you, right?" he said, his expression sincere. "You're the best thing in my life." His words hit me like a wave, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I had always known my dad loved me, but this felt different. There was an intensity to it that made my heart. On our last day at the resort, as we packed our bags, I stumbled upon a letter he had written but hadn't given me. I didn't mean to find it, but as I read the heartfelt words, I realized he had poured his feelings into it. He expressed how much he cared for me, how proud he was of the woman I had become, and how much he cherished the time we'd spent together. But there was also an underlying tension, a hint of something more, that made my stomach flutter. Just then, I heard him come into the room. His face turned pale when he saw me holding the letter. "Eva, did you find something?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. "I did, Dad," I replied, my heart racing. "And I want to talk about it." In that moment, I knew we had crossed a line, and it was both exciting and terrifying. We sat down, and I took a deep breath. "Dad, I feel something special between us, and I can't pretend it's not there," I confessed, my heart pounding in my chest. He looked surprised, his eyes widening. "Eva, I care more about you than you realize, but we must exercise caution. Our relationship is unique, and I don't want to ruin it," he said, his voice shaking slightly. We agreed to honor the love we shared while focusing on our father-daughter bond. It was a difficult conversation, but it helped us grow closer. As we drove home, I felt a range of emotions swirling around inside me. That vacation had changed everything, but I knew we'd always be together. I smiled at my father, who was focused on the road, and thanked him for our time together. I realized that love can be complicated, but the most important thing is to cherish the bond we have. As we returned home, I couldn't shake the sense of excitement and apprehension that had persisted throughout the vacation. The drive back had been quiet, each of us lost in our own thoughts, but the air between us was thick with unspoken words. It wasn't just that we had spent a week together, free of the distractions of our daily lives. The moments we shared, the fleeting glances, the closeness, made me wonder where we stood. Had the week truly altered our relationship, or was I overthinking things? I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't ignore the bond we shared. The father-daughter relationship had always been a part of our lives, but it was unique. The emotions we shared during the trip made me realize how deep our connection was, and while I tried to convince myself that it was all just a result of spending so much time together in such an emotionally charged environment, a part of me knew there was more. As I unpacked my bags, I couldn't help but stare at my father from across the room. He sat at the kitchen table, lost in thought, his hands clasped together as if he were also trying to make sense of everything. He looked at me sometimes, and his gaze lingered. There was something there that I couldn't quite grasp, which made my heart race with both excitement and confusion. I glanced at him again, but this time our gazes met. My breath caught in my throat, his expression was intense and spoke volumes, and for a brief moment I felt frozen. Could he feel it too? Did he know what was going on between us? But before I could say anything, he stood up and broke the spell. "I'm going to make some coffee," he said, his voice softer than usual, as if he wanted to lighten the mood. I nodded, attempting to conceal the emotions that were swirling within me. We were both trying to figure this out, but I couldn't express how I felt. That evening, we had dinner. The house seemed quieter than usual. There was a weight in the air, a gentle tension that seemed to hang over everything. The food was delicious, but I could not concentrate on it. I was too preoccupied with my thoughts and the way my father looked at me while we ate. The conversation remained light, nothing unusual, but I could tell we were both thinking about the same thing: the unspoken words, the moments of intimacy that had left us both wondering what to do next. I knew my father was also struggling with it. He had been quieter than usual, as if he was figuring out the best way to handle everything. After dinner, we decided to take a walk. It was a short walk around the neighborhood, but it felt significant. The air was cool and crisp, and the roads were quiet. As we walked side by side, I couldn't help but feel like we were on a tightrope, with each step bringing us closer to something we didn't know how to handle. The conversation flowed easily, as it always does. We discussed everything, from work to memories from the past. But as I reflected on it, I realized how much had changed. It wasn't just that we had spent time together, we were now very different. I was no longer his daughter, and he was no longer just my father. There was something more, and we were both unsure what to do with it. We walked past a small park with a swing set. A childhood memory came flooding back to me. I used to enjoy swinging at the park, with my father always pushing me higher and higher until I felt like I could reach the sky. "Dad, do you remember when we used to visit parks like this when I was younger?" I asked, a wave of nostalgia washing over me. "Of course," he replied, his eyes sparkling with the memory. "You used to be fearless, always climbing higher than the other kids." "I guess I still am," I joked, a smile tugging on my lips. Without thinking, I walked over to the swing set. My father chuckled and shook his head. "I don't think I can fit on those swings anymore," he said, laughing. To my surprise, he moved closer to the swing, placing his hands on the chains and preparing to sit. "Come on, let's swing together," I exclaimed, my voice full of enthusiasm. I wanted to relive the feeling of childhood joy, of being safe and free with my father. To my delight, he agreed. We both squeezed into the swing, hoping to get comfortable. The swing creaked as we pushed off the ground, and the wind blew through my hair. We swung higher and higher, laughing as we hadn't in years. For a brief moment, everything seemed perfect. "This is ridiculous," he exclaimed between fits of laughter, "but it's kind of fun." We slowed down after a while, and the laughter faded as we swayed gently back and forth. I turned to him, sensing that familiar closeness between us. It felt like no time had passed, as if we were still the father and daughter who had shared so many carefree moments together. "Dad," I asked softly, "do you remember when we used to do this all the time?" "I do," he said, his voice full of warmth. "You were always so fearless, always pushing me to go further." I guess I still am, I said jokingly, smiling at him. But then something changed. Our gazes locked, and I could see a range of emotions flickering through his eyes. It was as if we both realized something simultaneously. The spark between us had always existed, but now it felt stronger and more intense. Without thinking, I reached out to touch his hand. When my fingers brushed against his, a surge of electricity passed through me. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt unable to breathe. "Dad," I whispered, unsure how to proceed. My mind was racing, but my body seemed to react on its own, drawn to him in ways I couldn't explain. He looked at me, his breathing slightly deeper. "Ava," he began. But before he could finish, a group of children ran by, laughing and playing, breaking the silence. We quickly distanced ourselves from each other, both shocked by what had happened. We walked back in silence, the weight of the situation hanging over us. I could feel the tension rising between us, the unspoken words we both knew we needed to say. It was simultaneously confusing, exhilarating, and terrifying. As time passed, we continued to navigate this new reality. We had fleeting moments, lingering touches, and glances that spoke volumes beyond words. Each one caused my heart to race, and I found myself craving those interactions more and more. However, with each passing day, I became increasingly unsure of what we were doing. Could we continue like this without crossing any lines? Or would our bond grow into something neither of us was prepared for? One weekend, we decided to go to a nearby town for a festival. The atmosphere was lively, with laughter and music, and the aroma of street food hung in the air. As we walked through the crowd, I felt free. For a brief moment, the weight of everything seemed to lift, allowing me to simply enjoy being with my father. "Let us try some of that." I pointed to a food stall selling cotton candy. We both indulged, laughing like children as we shared the sweet treat. When I turned to look at him, something in his eyes caught my breath. There was an intensity, a connection that drew me in. "You know, I've never had anyone make me feel this way," I said, my heart racing. The words felt raw and unfiltered, but they needed to be said. "I feel the same, Ava," he said, his voice low and sincere. His eyes softened, and I could see the conflict there. Just then, a couple walked past, holding hands and laughing. I felt a pang of jealousy, realizing that others might perceive us differently if they saw how we interacted. "Do you think people notice us?" I asked, feeling vulnerable. He appeared thoughtful, his expression serious. "Maybe, but it's our connection that counts. Just remember, no matter how we feel, we must be cautious about how we behave in public." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the festival, I felt compelled to capture the moment. "Let's take a selfie," I suggested while holding up my phone. We posed for the photo, standing close together. As I looked at the photo, I couldn't help but notice our unspoken bond reflected in our eyes. It was a moment I knew I'd remember forever. After the festival, we returned home with full hearts and racing minds. I felt like we were walking a tightrope, balancing on the edge of something beautiful but dangerous. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind wandering to the possibilities ahead. Could we continue to experience these emotions without losing ourselves? Or would we cross an uncrossable line? I knew one thing for certain. This journey was only beginning, and I was prepared to embrace it no matter where it led.